Coming up.
There it is.
What the is that? We take apart a motorsport V8 engine bit by bit and find...
Let's start with the best one.
You know how the story goes, you buy a project car, you get excited, then logically you buy more project cars, you get busy, and then this one ends up collecting dust for over 3 years. Then you finally start working on it and discover it needs...
We need a new engine.
So as every normal person does, you get even more excited. 13 years in total, this BMW E39 M5 spent off the road, and we are on a mission to restore it to absolute perfection. Starting with the engine, which had to come out due to scored cylinders and subsequently oil consumption. In this video, we are going to take apart the legendary S62 V8 engine step by step and see how much wear and tear it accumulated over 226,000 kilometers.
Come to my lair. Yes. The first thing that you need to know, I'm getting over a cold, so besides sounding like a jacked up squirrel, I lost my ability to scream like a man. Some girl in the background, but yeah, that ain't it. But anyway, let's take this engine apart. I think first, let's divorce the transmission and the engine, and then we can move this party onto the engine stand. So these clips we can zinc plate, and then they're gonna look like brand new. Well, better than brand new, because they were never zinc plated. All right, let's start unbolting the transmission. What? Very loose. This car had a clutch change and the rear main seal replaced, I think, shortly before it's put into storage. And I know not a lot of kilometers was driven with the clutch. Crank sensor removed. Just slide off here. All right. A lift with the knees, huh? Okay. It's not that heavy. It's not like the 6-speed in the E31. The pressure plate and the clutch plate release the bolts in a crisscross pattern. So I don't know how many kilometers this clutch has, but it didn't replace the flywheel. I can tell you that much. I can see sanding marks here, so most likely the original flywheel. And they just replaced the clutch plate and the pressure plate, which does look, well, like brand new. Ooh, heavy. I think I was told that the rear main seal was replaced, but well, it wasn't leaking, so maybe it was. It looks very dirty though. Here's what we're gonna do next. I'm going to unclip the positive cable from the subframe, and then we're gonna lift the engine out of the subframe and put it on the engine stand. Perfect. We need to disconnect this power steering line. We can position the arm for the engine stand now. I have 10.9 grade bolts, so nice strong bolts. And here we're going to use this reinforcement plate that I had made when we did Alpina B7 Project Chicago engine. The engine mount nuts. Now we need to lift the engine up in the air, and we have two hooking points, one in the back here and one here. Time to break out the apple picker. Here it is. I need a haircut. I'll get that done tomorrow. I'm gonna secure the starter to the exhaust manifold. We're not gonna rip the cables. Get the table out of here. Okay, here we are. This is the usual place where we take apart the engines, aka the engine room. First things first, let's remove the wiring harness completely. Disconnect the positive cable from the alternator. We have a plastic nut here. Then the positive terminal on the top. Have the starter connector here. That's the starter out.
connector there, throttle position sensor connector here, and the cam sensor. This is the intake side. These are notorious for going bad, and these are, I believe, the old style sensors. This is the coolant line that I was struggling to remove because I couldn't get a good grip on it. There it is. Plug the connectors. This one here. Keep in mind that all of these connectors are exact length and they go exactly where they need to go, so you can't like mix up these two, you know, it just wouldn't work. That's a beautiful thing when working on semi-modern engines. There it is. Need to remove this bracket here. And that's everything loose on this side as well. Let's get the PCV valves out of the way. Another purge valve here. And that's this side unplugged. The temperature switch. And the Vanos pressure accumulator. The throttle actuator connector. And now we need to unplug the injectors. And we have the old style clips. One more connector here. This is the idle control valve. I think that's everything. Yep, nice. Now we're talking. Now we get to the mechanical bits. Let's remove these awful exhaust manifolds. Got rust loser from Liqui Moly. This MOS21 works particularly well. Fun fact, these crappy exhaust manifolds are the exact same ones as on the M60 engine, the first BMW V8 engine in modern era, 1992 to be precise, long before the S62 was even a thing. And I heard directly from a BMW employee that when BMW was developing the S62 engine, engineers made custom-specific S62 headers, and with those headers, this engine was making 450 horsepower on the test bed. But it was too expensive to put those headers into production, and they said 400 horsepower is more than enough. They just went to the parts bin and grabbed the M60 exhaust manifolds, and the rest is history. So one very popular mod on the E39 M5 is to upgrade the headers, and you instantly gain 40 to 50 horsepower. So take a guess what we'll be doing in the future. Be gone, stupid restrictive exhaust manifolds. Let's remove the oil lines. They're leaking all over the place and it's annoying me. Let's get the crispy belts off. That's a shiny looking bolt. Shot. Not too bad. It really isn't that noisy. And that's fine as well. The belt, however, are really, really bad. The water pump. Look at that. That's a brand new bolt. Don't need to zinc plate it. The tensioner. Let's remove the old original brilliant alternator, really good quality. This is Bosch, made in Germany, and we are going to just service this, replace the bearings and brushes on the back, and this is good to go for another, well, 300,000 kilometers or so. Don't throw away old original parts, especially something that's as good as this, because Bosch alternator today, it's made in China, and it's nowhere near as good quality as this stuff here. Connector on the back. The power steering pump, one bolt in the back here, and two in the front. Look at the state of this belt, really bad. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the original belt, probably never replaced. Very, very crispy. Oh wait, yep, this one is shot as well. The AC compressor, we have 3 bolts and a bracket here.
Let's see if the bearing is shot. Yes, that's very noisy. Ooh! The wire here is... the sheeting is broken. Look at that. Coolant hose. The Vanos oil line, this one is somewhat prone to failing due to age, and when this line pops, you're gonna get oil everywhere in front of your engine. So if you're servicing the S62 engine, add this to the list as part of preventative maintenance. If you remove this big screw plug on the end, you will find a mesh filter inside. And that is not on the parts diagram for the S62 engine. However, you can find it on the parts diagram for the S54 engine, E46 M3. Something that you can also service and replace. Let's remove the secondary air pipe and the valve here. Can remove this as well. There's a cable that's clipped in here. There you go. It's out, and this needs to be thoroughly cleaned. This is very common to get plugged, especially if you don't drive your car like it's meant to be driven. Low revs, babying the car. Oh yeah, full of carbon. So a lot of people code this system out and just disconnect it. You can see the secondary air channel there, full of carbon. So that's impossible to clean unless you take the cylinder head off. Let's get the Vanos pressure accumulator off. Unplug the connector of the oil scavenger pump. There's one on each side of the upper oil pan. Unclip the wiring. It's out. The thermostat housing. So you have 3 pipes on the back. The famous O-rings. Silicone spray. There it is. That's the thermostat housing with the thermostat. Let's get the flange gaskets off. It's probably never off. Let's remove this vacuum hose. Now we can remove the fuel rails and the injectors. Let's remove the idle control valve. And this purge valve. Need to remember this routing here, and the best way to remember, take a picture. The throttle actuator. Funnily enough, the S65 and S85 engines are littered with throttle actuator problems, but on the S62, I've never heard of this thing failing. Maybe they do, but again, I've never heard of it. So disconnect the arm, the connector here. There we go. Now we're going to remove the throttle bodies. Carefully remove the gaskets. Don't damage the surface. Copy paste on bank 1. This is a port injected engine, so the intake ports are squeaky clean, as you can see. The valves look great. This side is the same as well. Let's remove the coolant pipe. Surprised to see that these never leak either. Rubber gaskets. NOx sensors. Let's get this coolant pipe out of the way. There we go. Oh, a sleeve that went there. Let's get the purge valve out of the way. Bracket for the throttle actuator. The cooler. There we are. Okay, stop it. This is a heat exchanger for coolant and oil. Never knew that about the S62. Look. Oil, coolant. Let's drain the coolant from the block. Inspect the big splash here. All right, I'm gonna crack open the other side as well. Let's remove the oil dipstick. There we are. Let's remove the engine support arm. Oh man, we're gonna have so much stuff to vapor blast. Looking forward to that. Unplug the oil level sensor and the solenoid. Cable removed. I'm gonna put this back because we'll need it. The left engine mount arm. So here's where we're at right now. This McBlown chicken is getting skinnier by a minute. The valve cover, bit of a wipey wipe here. The threads in the cylinder heads are made out of cheese, so I don't recommend using power tools here. Just my hand, loosen them all, and then you can use power tools to drive the bolts out. Also, when tightening these, never use an impact to, torque them to spec. Very likely that this valve cover was never off. This car is so original, and I love it. You can usually see if you pull out the threads from the head. Let's pop the valve cover. Gently pry it up. Oh my. That is on there, man. Okay. Okay, it's coming. Very varnished and sludgy. Typical for the S62 engine because they used shitty castor oil from the factory. Don't like it one bit. And they use lower temperature thermostats, 79 degrees Celsius. So if you do a lot of short distance driving, the engine is not going to reach the operating temperature. It needs to be at least 100 degrees Celsius for condensation, water to burn off. And if it reaches only 70 or 80 or whatever, this happens. Varnish all over the place. Yeah, this gasket is very hard. I mean, it's still somewhat pliable, but it was leaking like crazy. Yeah, this is factory sealant. Whenever you see like yellow sealant like that, that's from the factory. So original valve cover gasket. Really impressive. So here's a closer look. Lots of varnish and sludge. I think mine was actually a bit better looking inside than this one, if memory serves me right. Long oil change intervals will also do this. And from the factory, it was stupidly long. The cams look beautiful. Practically no wear. Copy paste on bank 2. Same dealio on bank 2. Finally, after years and years of begging and crying, I got myself a diesel. Oh, we're gonna have ourselves a luxury creeper. Here it is, my brand new Veltron infrared diesel heater. Has 4 wheels and it runs in diesel. Man, it looks beautiful. Silver, huh?
I've been using the infrared diesel heater from Veltron for 2 winters now, and it's been literally a lifesaver. So when Ardo from Veltron offered me to upgrade to their latest and bigger model, I happily jumped on it. If you're in the same boat as I am, where you have no heating in the shop, and the cost to install a heating system is simply too high, as this shop isn't mine, you're looking at the solution to your problems. This is an inexpensive and highly efficient way to stay warm as the heat transfers onto things and people, and you get maximum heat within 120 seconds. It has 4 robust wheels, so moving it around the shop is easy, and this newest model has Wi-Fi, so I can easily control and fire up the heater from my home, which is super neat. Since I'm constantly filming, noise is a crucial thing for me, and this machine is rather quiet at only 32 decibels. I've taken apart this entire engine with it standing next to me, and it kept me warm while not messing up the audio. Now, as the machine burns diesel so efficiently, there is no smoke or nasty smells coming out of it.
Starting. Look at that. No smoke. Like, look. No smoke. No smell of diesel.
It's meant for outdoor and indoor heating, but please use your brain and use the machine responsibly, and always have the CO2 monitor nearby. You can't enclose yourself in a room with no ventilation. Just like with any gas or fuel burning heater, the machine needs a constant supply of fresh air to burn efficiently, or an exhaust. This is what I've done. I ran an exhaust pipe, and even with the machine running all day, it doesn't go over 700 ppm. In 2 winters with this machine, I've only had to replace the fuel filter and the injector once, which comes as a part of the service kit. It's been hassle-free and reliable heating for me, so I can honestly recommend it. Great build quality and great value for money. A lot more information can be found on their website. They have a new store in Germany now, and the heaters are also available for delivery in all European countries. Thank you to Weltron for sending me the heater and keeping me warm on these stupid, dreadful winter days.
Now we're going to start removing the Vanos units, which means we need the timing tools. This is the timing tool kit that I bought from Mr. Shady from Speed Haven Racing from the US, and he ain't shady at all. That's just his name, I guess. But anyway, the tools look very good quality, so let's put them to use. First, we need to remove these oil channels or oil strips. Now I'm going to start turning over the engine, so I'm going to use some fogging oil from Men on the cams because they're looking dry. Now I'm going to put the engine on top dead center. You can see a marking here on the vibration damper that says OT. That's obere Totpunkt in German, which means top dead center in English. So we need to line up this hole with this hole here, and then we can put the pin from the timing tool kit in there and lock the crank. So I remove the spark plugs. This should turn over easily. And that's the crank locked. You will also know that the engine is a top dead center if the cam lobes in cylinder number 1 are pointing upwards and towards each other like this. Before we start removing the Vanos adjustment unit, one needs to set the Vanos in its initial position. For that, BMW calls for a special tool. You have an air line going into this port here, and you have like a little switch panel to which you hook up this connector for the solenoids, and then that connects to a power source, and then you can manually activate and toggle the Vanos solenoids and relieve the pressure from the Vanos unit. Now, we don't have that special tool, so we are going to simply remove the Vanos solenoids with the boards, which is going to relieve the pressure from the Vanos unit. And then we're going to pop these two covers here, which will enable us to see a bit easier in which position the Vanos is in. And then we can rock the cam back and forth and get the Vanos unit off. Simple as that. Remove the solenoid cover bolt, these 5 bolts here. So there's a gasket here. These are original untouched Vanos solenoids, no marks on them, and you can see that the solder is original as well. So grab a flat-headed screwdriver and start prying them out. Very carefully and very gingerly. You don't want to break the board or the solenoids. I believe these parts are NLA, so grab a screwdriver. There's a lip there, which you can use to pry the solenoid out. There's one. Should be some oil there, and there is. There, remove the solenoids, the board. Like I said, there's oil there. So the S62 engine rarely has issues with the Vanos unit itself. It's almost always the Vanos solenoids. First bit is that this solder here on the board cracks due to age, and then it creates electrical issues. So you need to remove the old solder, resolder it, and that's how you fix that issue. The second part is, well, are the solenoids itself. You have this stupid mesh filter here, which has a mesh filter right over there, which eventually comes off and it clogs the solenoids, and then you have issues with the Vanos unit. So you need to remove this and throw it away, and then use a 9-volt battery to activate and at the same time clean all of these solenoids, and that's how you service them. That's something that we're going to do in due time. For now, put the solenoids in a clean plastic bag. Next, we need to remove the piston covers. Now we need to pry the cover off because there's an O-ring here. It's out. So there's an O-ring here, which is why it's a tight fit. Yep. Copy paste on bank 2. You can see here in the cam caps and the cams, like slots or cuts, those need to line up, and that's when you know that the timing is set correctly, because we can drop the pins through this hole and lock the cams, and also that the Vanos is in its initial position. So this one is pretty much there, the intake cam, and the exhaust cam is way off, so we need to start moving the cams and get those lined up. This is where you grab the cams with a 27mm wrench, which you might need to modify, but the timing toolkit that I have comes with one, so it slots here. You gotta be careful not to damage the cylinder head or the hydraulic lifter that's directly below it. So put that in there, then we can use a ratchet and we can start moving the cam. The whole engine stand is moving, but basically you need to rock the cam back and forth till you get it into position. And there it is, that's the slots on the exhaust cam lined up. Now we can grab the cam pins from the timing toolkit, and it should slot in like that. You might need to wiggle the cams back and forth a little bit, but I already set them to the right position, and now the cams are locked. And in the front you can see that these pistons here are sitting at the end of their travel, and that's how you know that the Vanos unit is in its initial position. Now you're going to do the exact same thing on bank 2. Spot on. So again with the exhaust cam, so rock it back and forth. This one we need to rock a little bit back and forth. And there it is. Now we need to remove all of the locking pins and set the engine at overlap TDC. So one full rotation at the vibration damper here. That'll set it at overlap TDC. Then we can access the first set of 3 bolts for the Vanos hubs, 6 in total on one hub. Once they're loose, we need to put the engine back at TDC. So once again, full rotation here at the vibration damper. And then we can access the remaining 3 bolts and start pulling the Vanos units off. So out with the pins. This one might be tricky because I used a hammer to put it in. And it is. Okay, I'm gonna remove the entire thing here and then knock it out. Now we can start slackening the Vanos hub bolts, whichever ones you can access. So 10mm spanner, and just loosen it. Do the same on bank 2. Now we need to put the engine back at TDC, so remove the pin. Okay. Drop the locking pins into place. There it is. And now slacken the rest of the bolts. And that's all of the hub bolts loose. Remove all of the Vanos bolts. There are openings here on each side of the Vanos where you can put a screwdriver and pry out the Vanos unit. There it is. Now we can either separate the helical gears from the Vanos unit, or we can remove the pins and wiggle the cams and get them all out together. Try that first. Okay, that one is out. There it is. So you can either do that, or you can simply split them here, and then the helical gears are gonna stay in here, and then you can just pull them out later. We're gonna do it both ways. So on this side I wanted to do it like this, and on the other side I'm gonna split them. And this is something that we're going to rebuild as well in due time, this entire Vanos unit. Refresh it and upgrade it as well. But essentially this is how the variable valve timing works. So you have this helical gear here, or like a plunger inside of the Vanos unit. Works based on oil pressure, so it pushes this plunger, which in return pushes this sprocket here on the cam, and then it adjusts timing as required. So now I'm gonna put the pins back into place. Bank 2. Now we're going to disconnect the helical gears from the Vanos unit. So a 10mm spanner here and a 7mm inside to hold it. And this is a left-hand thread, if memory serves me right. There it is. And do the one on the intake cam as well.
Obviously, be careful not to drop the Venice unit. That would be extremely bad. And let's the Venice unit off. This was probably easier than the other way around. So you gotta make sure that these hub bolts are really, really loose. That way you can move the hub freely and get the helical gears out super easily. The 3 hub bolts on the bottom side are not super loose, which means I can't pull out this gear. I mean, I can wiggle the cam here and then pull it out, but I'm just gonna wait until I remove the timing cover. So yeah, when you're doing this, make sure that these are super loose because there's a loaded, like a spring plate inside. So once you loosen them gradually, it's gonna keep coming out and pushing on these bolts. So you gotta make sure that they're pretty loose. Collect the O-rings here. Now we need to remove the oil input regulator, this thing here. For that we can pry on the inside and get it out because there's an O-ring there. Carefully, again, don't drop anything. Same deal on the deal on bank 1. Now I'm going to remove the upper timing covers, but first we need to remove the timing chain tensioner. Original tensioner. This is a good bit of preventative maintenance to do. I've done it on mine when I got the car at 160,000 kilometers. Now it's like 215. And the chains are still good, and the guides as well. Now you can remove the timing cover. There's another one here on the side. Gentle tap. There it is. Look how black the engine is on the inside. So when loosening these bolts, make sure you back them out quite a bit. You see that this one is now tight. So now all of them are loose. And we can pull out the helical gear. There it is. Now we're going to remove the water pump, but first we need to remove the crank pulley and the vibration damper to get to the water pump bolts. We have this special tool from the timing tool kit to counter hold the vibration damper so we can remove the 4 bolts. What we can do now is turn the crank anti-clockwise and jam the tool up against the upper oil pan. We can do that because this way also all of the pistons are away from the valves. And now we can undo the 4 bolts. Grab a breaker bar. Remove the bracket here. And drive out all of the bolts. Front main seal wasn't leaking, that's nice. Bolt the water pump. Bit of a splash. The pump bearing still appears to be in good condition. Oil return pipe. So thick O-ring and a washer. Now we're gonna flip this chicken over so we can remove the oil pans. The lower oil pan, first we're going to remove the oil level sensor. This is a brand new one that we're going to reuse. Now we're going to remove the oil scavenger pump, aka the solenoid. Now we want to remove the oil pump, but first we're going to remove these pipes here. This is where we found the timing chain guides. Let's remove these covers here. Now we have access to the chain. To get the nut off, I'm going to use an impact gun. There it is. Slide out sprocket, remove it. Now we can unbolt the oil pump. Now we can remove the upper oil pan. Crack open the coffin.
Let's flip over the chicken once again. Stupid engine stand. Need to hammer in the pin because it's a high quality product. Gonna put back the vibration damper temporarily. So what we want to do now, because we're going to be removing the camshafts, is put the engine 45 degrees before TDC. So this is top dead center, and we need to turn the crank clockwise 45 degrees, which is about there in between these two bolts. And that way the piston is further down in the cylinder and away from the valves, so we can safely remove everything else. So leave it right about there, close to this bolt here. And with that, we no longer need the crank pulley. Now we can get the lower timing cover off. Here's our first proper look at the timing chain guides. This one is a little bit loose here. You can see a bracket here that holds this plastic in place. Well, like a clip. It's broken here, it's missing. And then a small piece missing there. And then this guide has a small piece missing as well. So overall, not too bad, but definitely due for replacement. Remove the hub bolts all the way. This plate here comes apart from the splines here, and then on the back you have this spring washer, so pay attention to that. And another plate. Now we can get the sprocket off. Now the exhaust side. Now we need to loosen these bolts here, but you don't want to loosen them while the cam is locked with the tool, because that can potentially damage the tool or the cam. And then when the time comes to set the timing, it won't be set correctly. So I'm gonna grab the 27 mil, remove the pin, but once I do that, the camshaft will want to spring 30 degrees in that direction of rotation, at least according to the repair manual. Be prepared for that. Yep, definitely wants to spring back. So let's just loosen all of them. All right. And let's lock it back in place. And this is why it's good to have the piston at a lower position. Same process for the exhaust cam. Remove the tool. So now I need to remove the centering sleeve, but again, careful. So remove the sleeve. Copy paste on the exhaust cam. It's funny seeing how different the early Venus was on BMWs. Like, this is very similar to S54, M52, M54, and then the S65, the spiritual successor to this engine. The V8 in the M3 just has a big Venus unit that's held in with one bolt, and here you have like 16 million plates and 13 bolts and this and that. So it's fun to see how they made it simpler and more reliable. So came out with the sleeve, compress the tensioner, and get the sprocket off. Now we can remove the secondary chain tensioner. Massive O-ring there. Rinse and repeat on bank 2. Can extract the chain now. Big chain this, double row chain. Let's remove this guide here. What kind of weird guide is this? And now the U-guide, this is the one that most commonly fails, and as you can see, it failed here as well. Look at the amount of sludge there. I mean, it's in the corner, but that's quite a lot of sludge. It's an O-ring here, and yeah, that's the failed guide. All things considering, for the age in kilometers that this car has, it's not terrible, but if one were to keep driving like this would fail completely, and then there would be chain rattle. Now we can start removing the cams, and as we'll be moving the cams, now is a good opportunity to make sure that the pistons are slightly down and there cannot be any piston to valve contact, which is also a great opportunity to show my new toy from Hazit. Look at this thing. Let me fire up the app. This is a borescope or endoscope. Look at that, and look. How cool is that? So my man Philip sent me this for New Year's, and I absolutely love it. The fact that it can connect to my phone. So let's record together, shall we? So that goes in there. And then now I can see that the piston is slightly down, which is perfecto. Cylinder number 2 as well. 3, you can see the scoring marks pretty vividly. Yep, look at that. Woohoo! Those are some nice scoring marks. And then cylinder number 4 scored as well. And the piston is way down. I gotta say, I absolutely love this tool. And the fact that it connects to my phone so I can download the video immediately. Thank you so much, Philip. I love this tool. So nifty. Per the repair manual, we need to move the exhaust cam until the lobes on cylinder number 2, which is this one, point upwards, and then we can start removing it. So remove the locking pin, and it'll want to spring back. Remove the spanner. And then the intake cam, same dealio, except here the lobes in cylinder number 1 need to point up. So it'll want to spring back. There you go. And now we can start removing and loosening the caps. We are starting from outside to in, and all of the caps are marked. You have E1, E2, E3, 4, 5. E stands for Einlass, inlet. And then here you have A1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which stands for Auslass, which is exhaust. So you can't mix them up. I mean, you can, but you gotta pay attention to that. So the camshafts are now in the removal position, and we can start loosening the cap bolts. We are loosening from outside to in like half-turn increments. Carefully lift out the cam. Heavy cam. Copy paste with the exhaust cam. Grab the cam. The lifters. There's a pipe here that we can remove. I assume there's an O-ring there. Oh, I see! It's hitting the cylinder head bolt, so it cannot come out. So remind me to put this in first before I put the head bolts in when the assembly time comes. Now we can remove the stuff on the back of the cylinder head. So these are the camshaft position sensors. Very common to cause issues, especially if the original ones, because they were different design, and one of the first things that I replaced in my car because they're known to fail. So yep, that's the original one. You can see that this bit here is smaller, so that's the early design that was then surpassed. And these can cause various vanish issues. Bank 2, the exhaust cam, the lobes on cylinder number 6 need to point up. So, same dealio. Carefully rotate the cam. Right. There we are. The intake cam, the lobes on cylinder number 8, which is the last one, need to point up. There we are. Cams set in the removal position. exhaust cam. Just wanted to show you this. Here's how I stay organized when taking an engine apart or just working on an engine or a car in general. Got these storage trays from eBay, super cheap. They come with like various little cups, and I store all of the bolts inside. I separate all of the bolts from their respective parts because I'm going to be zinc plating all of this stuff. And some of this stuff I know exactly what it is. Like this is transmission bolts. These are pressure plate, clutch pressure plate, bolts, and then stuff like this. I have no idea what that is. I'm gonna forget within 19 minutes. So I write it down on the box. Throttle actuators, knock sensors, right engine mount arm, you know, stuff like that. Coolant pipes, and I actually ran out of these trays because I have too many projects. So I also use Ziploc bags, and I write in them. So bank one, cylinder head rear, then crank pulley, lower timing cover, and yeah, everything is it's in respective bags. So when the time comes to zinc plate the stuff, I can just take them out, take the picture next to the bag, measure the bolts, because zinc plating plates, they mix up all of the bolts, and we need to know what goes, you know. So on top of that, I use carts to store all of the engine parts. This is a one from Hazard, and this is a food catering cart that I got online. I think it was like 100 and something euro, 110. And it's really nice because it's stainless steel, has nice wheels so you can roll it around the shop. And every single component that comes off the engine once it's on the engine stand goes here. So I know where everything is exactly, and I also bag and tag everything. So all of the internal bolts that I'm not going to zinc plate, that we just need to clean, they're in the Ziploc baggies. And in case of a disaster and, I don't know, an earthquake hits and this cart tips over, I'm not gonna lose any of the bolts, you know, everything is gonna stay in place. So when the engine rebuild time comes, I need to go through both of these carts, refurbish, clean, and prep everything for rebuild. And once I start putting everything back together, these carts, they need to be completely empty. Also, this, yeah, I mean, bear in mind that the shop space is quite limited, but this rack here, this is all Project Skovde. All of these parts came from the E39 M5, as well as this basket here and this basket. So this project ain't done until all of this is empty. The one on the left, that's E31, all E31 parts. So yeah, organization, it's a key when restoring a car because these things take a very long time. The engine, the heads, the block, they're gonna go to a machine shop. Sometimes it can take a half a year, I don't know, a few months, and I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. So I'm gonna remember where this bolt goes or that bolt. So it's very important to label everything and just be organized when assembling the engine especially. Anyway, let's take the heads off. Now we're gonna start removing the cylinder heads. This is bank one, and there is a specific procedure that we need to follow here. We need to loosen the bolts in a sequence, 10 to 1, which is essentially from outside to in, and that way we're not going to damage the cylinder head. So number 10 is here. So I got a breaker bar and a thin socket and extension, because this hole here is kind of small. Now we can use electric tools to get the bolts out. Start with this one, because when I get that pipe out. Yeah, there you go, it comes out now. Now we can lift out the cylinder head. It's going to need a couple of love taps. There we are. Hello, scored cylinders. Take this to the table. Yeah, you can feel it. It's not terrible, but you can definitely feel it. Anyway, we'll take a closer look in a minute, but let's remove the bank 2 cylinder head as well. Head gasket, good condition. Bank 2, same procedure. Release the bolts in a sequence from 10 to 1. And 1. Every single cylinder is scored. Remove the dowel from the block. Look at something interesting here. Bang 2 cylinders, no oil in the combustion chamber. And you can also see how the edges of the pistons are clean. That means that the oil was blowing past the piston rings and burning up in the combustion chamber, and as you can see, it was cleaning the pistons on the edges. But more interestingly, bank 1, the first 3 cylinders full of oil. And this is from when the engine was flipped upside down. The oil leaked past the piston rings into the combustion chamber. So the 3 fellas here were burning quite a lot of oil. And you can also see the edges clean. So all of these were burning oil. And of course, plenty of scratches and scoring marks. Anyway, let's remove the pistons and then we'll have a better look. It's so easy to flip it now. The S62 engine, unlike the S65 and S85, don't have issues with the rod bearings. Never did. But of course, the condition will widely depend on the overall maintenance and usage of the engine. But typically when you remove them, they don't have a ton of wear and they rarely fail. I mean, you would have to really neglect this engine and really abuse it to have spun rod bearings on the S62 engine. That being said, let's start removing the rod caps and get to the rod bearings. Loosen up the bolts. Look at that. Not bad at all. You never see that on the S85 or S65 with original rod bearings. But let's take a look at the top ones. Those get the most wear. So yeah, not bad. Not bad at all. A little bit of wear here, but overall really not alarming, and these bearings could have went for a lot more kilometers. So make sure not to scratch or damage the crank. Crank naturally in perfect condition. Well, let's get the piston out. There it is. All right, first piston is out. Grab the connecting rod. Don't like to drag it all over the cylinder walls. Let's rotate the crank. This is cylinder number 1, the worst one. And yeah, you can see some scoring marks on the piston skirts as well. Rather heavy ones. Yeah, this piston I wouldn't reuse. And this one is pretty scored as well. So all of the connecting rods and rod caps are laser etched or marked with numbers, matching numbers. So that's how you know which cap goes where. You can't mix and match them. These are cracks split from the factory and therefore cannot be mixed because each cap and connecting rod is unique. And the final piston is out. Here's what we have here. The lower rod bearings, a bit of wear. I would even call this minimal. The top bearings, however, they take most of the load and forces from the combustion, so they will always have more wear. And in this situation, it's not too bad. I mean, certainly a lot better than what you see on the S65 or S85. And I wouldn't say this is a situation where you need to panic and immediately do the rod bearings on the S62 engine. It's not that bad. The pistons, however, this is piston from cylinder number 1, and this one is badly scored. You can probably hear my fingernail catching there. So this piston is not reusable, especially not with brand new bores. The rest of them are half good, half not. Like this one here has a big gouge that you can see. This one as well, not as bad, you can't even feel it. here as well. But if you're going with a brand new block and cylinder walls, you're going with brand new pistons. The cylinder heads, other than heavy carbon buildup, they are in good condition. No mechanical damage. So they're good to be refurbished and upgraded. Let's check out the cylinders. She scored. Let's start with the best one, which is cylinder number 1. Plenty of vertical scratches. This is very similar to Alpina B7 block, although these are not as deep, but I can definitely feel them. Here as well, so all around this cylinder, these are pretty bad here. This one here is particularly bad. I hope you can hear that. That is a very deep scratch. Here as well, just all around scratched and scored. Another deep one here. Bank 2 is equally as good. This is cylinder number 8. Plenty scoring marks here as well. There's another bad one. Another really bad one here. And of course, this one is scored as well. So this is unfortunately what happens when the machine is not treated properly. Lots of carbon buildup, and when that gets in between the piston rings, the piston, you get stuff like this. Also just general not usage of the engine properly, irregular oil changes, stuff like that. And this car spent more time off the road than it did on the road. And it's really important to actually use and push the engine once in a while to burn off all of this carbon. That's why, for example, Project Rally E60 M5, 270,000 kilometers, and it's still like brand new. And that's because I drive the snot out of it on the Autobahn, rev it all the time, so all of this carbon and crap can burn off. It's really good for the engine, and it's really fun for the driver as well. So this block needs to be refurbished, and we need to use oversized pistons if you want to stick with Allo Seal. The S62 engine, I'm loving it so far. It's interesting to compare it to the S65 engine, which came after this one. That one is a proper race engine, bed plate, ported heads from the factory, so it's really low in the car. This one, main caps, the Vanos is hella complicated on this thing. On the S65 and S85, it's just one unit, you just bolt in, but here, yeah, so I'm loving it so far. I'm loving complex engines. So let's strip it further, take out the crank and remove all of the nuts and bolts, unplug all of the galleries and stuff, and then I'm gonna tell you how we're gonna rebuild it. We'll build it better than it ever was. You gotta take the engine off the stand so I can remove the rear main seal and this coolant cover. So let's get this out of the way and find some wheels and tires to put it underneath of the engine so I can just slide it over, you know, because this is quite heavy and I'd rather not break my back. Style X62 seems appropriate. Style 65, what did I say? Style 62? It's the engine, man. Okay, Hermione, let's slide over this chicken. Crank alone is heavy, let alone the whole block. There you go. That's the rear coolant cover off. Look at that, they use the same gasket as M70/M73. So you can see that's the cylinder right there. Coolant travels around it and it cools the thing. Rear main seal with the cover. Let's remove the pilot bearing while at it. Got myself a pilot bearing puller tool. So this thing goes in, and then as you thread in the stud, it's gonna spread out, and then we're gonna have a cup here and we can pull out the pilot bearing. A cup, washer, and the nut. So let's see if this is going to work. Oh, it's turning the crank. Hot diggity! I need 3 hands. Can use my leg. Yes, look at that. I can use my thigh. Oh, I am a genius. Okay. The washer is too weak, man. There are other tricks that you can use to remove this thing. Can pump up a grease in there, but I just wanted to try with a tool, you know? Let's try this again. I mean, this is a real professional's do it. So how did you get bruises there? Why fast? Good exercise, this. Nice, it's out, man. Worked out nicely. There it is. Let's put the block back on the stand. There we go. Now we're gonna remove the main bearing caps, and all of them are labeled, marked 1 to 5. So first we're gonna loosen the outer taper screws and then the inner main screws, bolts that is. So get the cap off. Tiny bit of wear here on the side. Thrust washers. Now you're gonna lift the crank straight up and take it to the table. So careful, this is heavy. Grab the washer. The main bearings, some wear, but nothing alarming. The main bearings are in really decent condition. I mean, some slight wear, but this is just the initial wear and it's nothing to worry about. If you compare this to the S65 that we took apart with less kilometers, those main bearings looked hella worse than this, especially the number 1 bearing, and here, decent. The crankshaft, mint. It's just perfect. There's no scratches, there's nothing, it's in mint condition. Now I'm gonna remove the piston squirters. They squirt oil to the pistons. Let's remove all of the plugs. A couple more gallery plugs on the back. How long is it? Scusi, this isn't a plug, this is a valve. Oil check valve. Got a plug in the front. And a dowel here. And that's the entire S62 engine taken apart down to the last bolt. 2 carts worth of parts, a bit more on the table over there. Let's do some measuring now. Now we're gonna measure the crankshaft, but the fact alone that this crank came out of a working engine that had no damage and all of the bearings look good means that this crank is good as well and within spec. But just for fun, we are going to measure it. The main journals are 70 millimeters and the rod journals are 49. Unfortunately, I don't have a tool to measure the rod journals. I have 50 to 75 millimeters, 75 to 100, and 0 to 25. Need to buy another tool to measure this one here. From the factory, the journals were measured and then they put paint here to mark them, which size they are, so it can be yellow, green, or white. And this one here is pretty much gone. Here I can see that it's green. This one looks red, so whatever that was. And then 2 more here that are completely gone. So if I grab my tool here and measure the first one, the size of the number 1 main journal is 69.964 millimeters for yellow ones, 0.957 for green, and 0.951 for white. Here we have 964, which is a yellow bearing. So we measure at 4 points essentially to make sure that the journal is not oval. And it's not, it's exactly the same. So number 1 is yellow. Number 2 journal has green paint, which means it should be 69.977 millimeters. And indeed, it is. That's a green bearing. Yep, number 3 is green as well. The last one is green as well. The crankshaft that came later in the S65 and S85 had stamps in the front, not stupid paint that comes off. So you would have yellow, green, white, whatever sizes of journals stamped or like laser etched right on the crank. You know, they learned with time how to do it properly. Yep, that one is green as well. So all within spec. Yellow, green, 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 green. In case anyone wants to see the specs. So yeah, the crank is in good condition, not oval, all within spec. Just needs to be cleaned and potentially polished. The pistons, we're not going to be using stock pistons, but just for fun, let's measure them. The pistons should be 93.950 millimeters, and we are measuring 12 millimeters below the piston skirt.
Let's see, the first one. This one is slightly above that. Almost 93.960. Same. Just under 960.960. Same. So these are all good pistons. And these are not marred up. Well, this one has a gouge on the side. And this is the worst one that has most of the gouges that came from cylinder number 1. And this one is 93.970. This one is larger than the others. That's peculiar, but it's probably because of all of these ridges in the skirts. But yeah, these three are good. This one is not good. So the cylinder bore size on a brand new S62 block is 94 millimeters. I have my bore gauge here that I zeroed out. As this is a used block, we are bound to see some taper and out of round condition here. This is a thrust side, and this one is going to see more wear than the non-thrust side because the piston is rocking back and forth, putting more load on these cylinder walls. So we're going to definitely see more wear here than here, as it is a used block. We are measuring at 3 places, so near the top, middle, and near the bottom. And then the same thing for the non-thrust side. So here we have 0.04 millimeters, middle 0.02, bottom 0.01. So it is slightly tapered. So let me bring you closer. So we're measuring the non-thrust side, cylinder number 3, that's 0, nice. Middle, pretty much 0 as well. The bottom, pretty much 0 as well. And then the non-thrust side, 0.05 millimeters. The middle, 0.03. And the bottom, 0.02. So cylinder number 3, tapered and out of round as well. Not gonna measure every single cylinder bore because at this point we know that this block needs to go to a machine shop. The piston to valve clearance is, well, should be from 0.003 to 0.037 millimeters. Here we have way more than that, so yeah, another reason why this engine was burning oil and another reason why we had to take it apart. The good news is that this block is absolutely savable. We just need to go one size up or oversized with the bores and the pistons. BMW says 0.20 millimeters. So the block needs to be bored out and then honed. Special alloy honing so you can re-expose silicone fingers on the surface and then go up with the piston size. That will be the easy route, but you know me, I like OEM Plus stuff, and this engine has so much potential. And when I build it and assemble it, I want to see 500 plus horsepower on the dyno. And that's very much doable, and I'm going to partner up with what I think is #1 person in the world when it comes to the S62 engine, Peter from Party Racing from Virginia, United States. They've been building S62 engines for years. I think they've done more than 100 of them, and they do race spec, street spec, stock plus spec, and stuff like that. And they offer 2 flavors right now, better than stock and high output engine. And guess which one we're gonna go with? And when Peter assembles one of those engines, they make between 430 and 460 wheel horsepower, which translates to about 500 to 540 horsepower, which is just nuts. In an E39 M5, that's more power than the E60 M5. And I already have a stock E39 M5, my OG, Le Mans Blue, and I wanna feel and see how a 500 plus horsepower E39 M5 feels. And of course, naturally aspirated, no superchargers, any nonsense. He has to be naturally aspirated. So I'm really excited about that because Peter is extremely knowledgeable, and I'm gonna try and make my way to him to visit him in Virginia and do a really nice, like full of nerdy and like details and stuff around the S62 engine, because Peter is gonna show a lot of stuff. The level of details that they go into is just nuts. They buy brand new blocks from BMW, and because I believe they're reproduction blocks, no longer the same as the old stock, they actually rehoned the blocks because they have this little device called profilometer, which measures how many silicone fingers or roughness of the surface in the cylinder bores, and it's not good enough from the factory, so they actually re-honed them. That is the level of details and stuff that they go into. I have two options here with Peter. He is very kind to offer me basically free labor. I have to pay for the parts, which is absolutely fine and normal. They're very expensive parts because this engine, once assembled, it's 30K plus, you know. But basically, the first option is to send him the block, the cylinder heads, and the crank, along with the timing covers, so he can machine all of those parts and then send them back to me. Or I can simply buy from him directly already prepped block, heads, crank, and that's just ready for assembly. I think I'm gonna do that route because then I can sell all of these parts here because all of this is usable, and that way I can save on shipping one way, because shipping from Germany to US, a crate or a pallet, very expensive. But anyway, we are going to do a very similar build to what we did with the S65 engine, every single nut and bolt down on the floor, and then assembly start to finish, which should be a really, really fun video because this engine is different than the S65, you know? I'm really, really excited. I mean, I live for this shit. So yeah, that's coming. In the next episode, we gotta blow apart the rest of the chassis because there's a lot of surface rust. It's not bad rust, but we need to take care of it. So the rear axle, the fuel tank, all of the plastic, fantastic bumpers, everything needs to come out, basically strip the chassis from underneath, and then it needs to go to a body shop to take care of the rust. Probably going to sandblast it and, you know, treat everything, stop the rust from spreading, remove it, and just make it look like brand new original again. And I want it done really, really properly. I'm talking with a really nice shop from Poland, and they are going to potentially take care of that car and the E39 and the E31 as well. And before I forget, I mentioned in the previous episode that I'm going to be selling this car once it's done, and I received 150 or something emails and messages across all of the platforms. First of all, thank you so much for your interest. I really appreciate that, and it just goes to show how popular the E39 M5 is. The Maserati, it's still for sale. Do you know how many emails I got about that car? 2 or 3. No one wants to buy it. Like, there is no serious interest in that car whatsoever. So maybe one of you want to buy a Maserati instead? No? Didn't think so. Anyway, when the time comes to sell the car, I'm going to announce it, and I'm probably going to put it on an auction or something because I can't cater to that many people. I don't know who's serious or not. That car, I can tell you already, it's not going to be cheap because just the engine alone, it's going to be 30K plus, and then everything else that I'm going to do with it. It's going to remain stock and original from the outside, 100%. Inside, I'm also considering doing a bit OEM plus stuff, maybe E38 contour seats with caramel leather. That would look really cool. I want to keep the essence of the E39 M5, so when someone sees the car, they can say, wow, nice classic E39 M5. Yet it ain't underneath. It has a lot more power. And, well, one thing that's going to be different is when you lift up the hood, there's going to be a microfiber plenum. We got to have that induction noise, you know. Anyway, I'm talking way too much. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're finding S62 content entertaining. A lot more of it coming soon. If you enjoyed the episode, maybe consider subscribing. That would be fantastic, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay in love, stay in love.